Alright guys, today we're going to be working on the Suzuki Eiger. Be doing the front wheel bearings today. As you can see, got some play in there. It's been about a year since I changed them, so we're going to go ahead and swap these out. Fairly easy, not too hard. Be done pretty easily. Thing you want to do is pop your wheel off. Mine is held on with 14 millimeter bolts each side. Next thing I like to do, it makes it a little bit easier, especially in the long run, is soak everything down with penetrating oil. I usually use Crow oil. I'm currently out of it, so I use the next best thing, a little bit of WD-40. And you know, I'd soak the castle nut around the rotor, you know, the two bolts that you're going to be popping off here for the upper ball joint, the lower ball joint, and the two for the caliper. I usually soak that. So when you get started, you want to pull this cotter pin out. You have a cotter pin here. I usually use a pair of needle nose, and you can use a pair of side cutters too. If you can't get it out, you can actually grab the side cutters and get them in there and wedge it out. I'm gonna pop that out. You can always reuse them. I don't really like to reuse them too much. The next thing you want to do is loosen that castle nut. The pins, I've already loosened all this up. Depends on what you're, you know, if you have factory axles or not. I don't. These nuts can vary. This for me is going to be a 30 millimeter. Went ahead and loosen that. Next thing you want to do is loosen your two bolts for your caliper. You have one down here and one up here. I've replaced that one, so it's stainless. So once you remove those two, your caliper will just slide. Well, I say it will. Might have a little dirt in there. You know what it is? Ooh, my mistake. I got my brake on. Like that. At least it works, huh? Next thing, after you remove your two bolts, you go ahead and slide that brake caliper off. Right now is a good time to check your brake pads. I usually get about 2 rides out of mine. So I buy these cheaper name brand. I've used EBC and Caltrick and Center something. I can't remember the names of them. And they never seem to last me in the mud and water, you know, as much as I go through it. So I just buy these cheap name brand pads. They're like 10 bucks for both sides, and they keep me running. I keep them in stock. I change them out like every 2 rides. Once you have this, you want to set your caliper out of the way, and then you can get to your bolts. You have one here. I believe it's a 10 millimeter. It might be a 14. I think it's a 14. No, I might be wrong. I got to get the size for that. So this bolt here and this bolt here are 12 millimeters. And then for your tie rod, I've replaced mine. Went to the all balls. You have a cotter pin in there. I just popped that out. My castle nut here is a 17 millimeter, but on a factory tie rods, it's 14. No, I'm wrong. It's a 12. It's a 12 millimeter, same as these. So you're gonna want to go ahead and loosen all this up. You'll see it. Those are your bolts. This one's still got a little pressure on it. On your tie rod, you can see that little groove right here. Sometimes this nut won't come off. You can stick a wrench right in here. It's probably metric. I didn't have a metric wrench next to me, so I just grabbed a 9/16 wrench and stuck that in there, and it fit pretty snug, and I was able to get it off. Once you do that, your tie rod would sometimes will, sometimes won't, pop right out of the hole. Rod doesn't want to come out, you can always tap on it, you know, with a rubber mallet. You don't want to beat on it with a hammer or anything like that, you know, maybe a rubber mallet or a plastic mallet, something like that. Give it a couple taps and she should break free. So now I got both loose, tie rods loose. I'm gonna go ahead and pop this castle nut off. Here, and then slide this out. And this is just basically your hub with a spline and your rotor. Now that you have all this loose, you can tap it here and here. Give her a couple taps. There. Give us a couple taps here. And she should. It's kind of hard to do this with one hand. Let me set the camera down. Once you give her a couple taps, she'll go down. This one will go up, and it'll slide right out of there. This is what you're going to be working on. You have 2 bearings and 2 seals. One of those seals is different, so you got to make sure you put it in there right. I'll discuss that later. Once you've done all that, I like to save everything, clean everything up, just you know, examine everything, make sure I don't have no cracks in my welds. You know, so on my old bike, I had it crack here on me and a little bit further back down the frame. And I always like to just go ahead and check everything, you know. Like those could be lubed up a bit. They sell a special little tool to put in there and grease them up. I'll show you all that. So once all that's done, you're gonna want to jump to the other side and do the same thing here. You know, you have your 2 bolts for your upper and lower tie rods. Upper and lower A-arms. You have your bolt for your tie rod. You know, your nut for the castle nut. Mine's a 30 millimeter. Yours might be different. Upper and lower, your 2 for your caliper. And that's about it. Once you have all that off, pull it off, and I'll show you how to replace the rest. Alright, now that you got everything ready, first thing you want to do is get a good place to mount this at. I got a vise, so I'll use a vise. You use a screwdriver to get this first seal out here. Just kind of want to wedge it in there a little bit and pop it right on out. You can see a lot of mud and gunk has been getting in there. What I'll do is flip it over and do the same thing to this side. Just work it around. She'll come right out. It's part of the seal for the bearing. And there you have it. It's one of your bearings. There's a spacer right in between, and your other bearing on the other side. So inside of here you have a lip. So each one of these bearings will come out. This one will come out this way. The other one will come out that way. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So I use a punch, and you want to get in here and push that spacer over a little bit to where you get to the top of that bearing, and you just want to tap it all the way around until she pops right on out. Once you pop out your bearings, you're gonna have a spacer in the middle. I'll save that, clean it up. You're gonna reuse it. Flip it over, do the same thing to get the other side out. You got your bearings pressed out. You want to clean the inside of this out really well. Usually, wash it all out real good, and then I grab a little light sandpaper and sand everything down real good. You're going to want to do the same thing with the inner bushing, that spacer. Sand it down, you know, just so you don't have oxidation in there. When you buy your wheel bearing kit, you're going to have two of the same size wheel bearings, and you're going to have two different seals. You have this seal here, and then you have this seal here. As you can see, this one has that lip on it. That lip is going to go towards the outside. That's right here. Well, I guess you would consider it the inside of your spindle. This actually goes around your CV axle and helps protect all that grime from getting in there. What I like to do is add a bit of marine grade grease and pack all this in here real good before I start pressing all this in. Usually I'll grab a piece of brass and I'll tap this bearing in, you know, about the size of this. I wanted to try something different. I was looking at a video, I believe the guy's name is D-Ray's Garage, something like that, and he shows you that what he does is he grabs one of the old bearings, which mine are pretty shot here. I had the outer halves, so I just grabbed the outer race of this bearing and cleaned it up and grinded it down. So what you do is you grind that down just to where it sits in there. You know, real easy, comes in and out, so that way it don't get jammed on you. And you use this to pry your bearing in, to press it in. That sits right around the outside, just like that. So you're not putting any pressure here, causing that bearing to mess up. So I'm gonna try this and see how it works. This is working pretty well, you know, by doing that. I was able to press them in real easy, centered, and go in real easy. Just a reminder, when you're pressing in your bearings, you see that lip right there, your bearings will stop at that lip on both sides. And before you put in your second bearing, don't forget to add that spacer. Once you get done, it should look something like this. Now, I am very generous with the amount of grease that I put in mine because of the amount of water that I go through. So I went ahead and packed the shit out of them to see if it's going to help out, which I believe it should. And once again, it's a marine grade grease, so it's pretty thick. So once I put my spindle in there, you know, it should clear it all out. But that's basically what you should look like. You know, the outside, I mean, yeah, I guess so. Outside should look like that, and your inside should have that lip. You got to be very careful with this, not to damage it. And that's what I also found out, that this works really good around there when you're pressing it in, because it'll sit right on the inside of it and will not damage. So that's actually a really helpful tip right there. Worked out really good. Now that you have your hubs taken off, this is a really good time to add a little bit of Never Seas in here. This is where your CV axle sits, and if you had trouble trying to get it off, this will help out quite a bit, and you get it all inside that spline. I also use marine grade on this as well. Flip these over and hit both sides, and it does a really good job. So that's the finished product, ready to go. I sprayed a little bit of Never Seas on here, spray can kind, just a little bit of spray, and you know, just blotch it a little bit with a paper towel, just so it kind of coats everything. Putting it back is just simple as same steps that you did. You know, your bottom ball joint, top ball joint, castle nut, tie rod. Just have everything kind of in place right now. But that's it, man. Tighten everything back up. Alright, we got everything done. Everything's on, new cotter pins. Everything's tight. Both sides are done. Time to put the wheels on it and try it out and see what happens. Wheel bearings were a success. That's it for today. Go ahead and load it up and head out to the trails. Once again, this is Throttle with RDM. Please like and subscribe.